Today's Humvee project was putting the H1 Alpha front bumper brush guard on the Humvee. It's a 2001 M1123, and I don't know that it's designed to actually go on this truck as it sits, so I had to make some modifications. I'm still not exactly sure how this is designed to work, because most of the Alpha photos I see have the winch plate sitting out about even with the front of the curved part of the brush guard, and in my case, of course, I don't have that set up. I may make that adjustment later. I kind of like the way it looks, and I do intend to put a winch, but I think I have room for the winch as it sits. It will probably just be an appearance thing, and if I can modify using my existing parts or making a few things on Syncut Sync most likely. So what I did was modify my half-inch flitch plate, which is basically used for strengthening a beam in a house, just some cheap steel I got off of Marketplace, and I used some Selden sailing tackle to hoist the brush guard so that I could get everything in place and see where it lined up. And the measurement center to center for the holes that bolt into the frame were 32 and 3/4 inch. That ended up hitting the metal frame gussets, I guess you'd call them, where the swivel ring normally would sit. So I no longer have use of that swivel ring, but I was able to make use of the part that was already there by modifying it just a little bit. And I think there's some kind of frame extender or some kind of part that can bolt in its place, but I don't have one of those. I did have this, and I guess I could just bolt those eyes back in if I wanted to go back. I don't have the weld that sits proud and kind of cups that bolt, but everything's a trade-off, I guess. So I had to cut the flitch plate and make room for the brush guard because it sits down and kind of back of where it bolts in. So fortunately, I've got a Diablo circular saw blade that is cermet carbide tipped, and whatever that means, it means that it will cut through half-inch steel and make pretty quick work of it. It's actually very impressive. And what I learned again is don't sit on line in the same plane as the blade, because the first thing I did was shoot sparks in my face and have to make a better plan. Fortunately, I had some safety glasses on, and I highly advise making sure you take time to pick those up. Additionally, make your safety squint, and making a lot of use of that with all the sparks that I'm sending out. And you're probably thinking that I'm throwing a lot of sparks at some plastic and other somewhat sensitive things, and you're right. There's probably a better way to do that, but I kept an eye on what I was doing, and it looked like it wasn't really doing any damage. So good enough, and that works for today. I was able to drill the holes to put the bolts on for the mounting brackets of the brush guard. Actually, use a lot more oil now when I'm drilling after reading Adam Savage's book. It's a really great book on, I guess I got it on Audible, but talks a lot about his life making things. It was very entertaining and something you might like, but he talked about using oil to take heat away from the bit, kind of like letting the oil take up the heat of the bit, and allows the cutting tip to last a lot longer. I think it's a great tip and something I've been using a lot of ever since I read that. So thanks for that. You can see here I've got these bolt holes, 66 millimeters center on center, and was then able, once everything was cut out of the way, to hoist the brush guard back in place and see how those holes lined up. Then just an assortment of bolts I had. I'll have to go to the store and get some stuff that matches up, but I had some 10-9 bolts sitting around and a little bit mismatch of size with the nuts, but I'll sort that out later. And for now, I was able to bolt on and sit in place. I was able to lift it up to the highest position that those bolts would allow. The bracket is nice. It actually can flip upside down. In my case, I flipped it upside down from how the bumper arrived. That made me able to put that on the center of the frame gusset, and then to bolt it in place at about the right height. I still think it's about 2 centimeters too low, but that's a fight for another day if I ever get that far to that level of detail. It seems like level was relative. I measured the hood to kind of see which side of the of even the bubble went to. But then again, the hood is not necessarily perfectly level with the frame, which is not perfectly level with the ground, which is not perfectly level. So it's all relative, and the most reliable method I got to was just eyeballing it, trying to look at very small differences in the way that the bar, mostly like the light bar and the crossbar, interacted with the grill and like the straight bottom edge of the hood. It was really just kind of the best method was to eyeball it. And I guess after all, if I look at it and it looks wrong, that's what's going to be most obvious in real life anyway, regardless of how all the level measurements line up. So that's what I went with. It worked pretty well. You can see that it actually fits pretty nice, and now the hinge for the bumper can tuck back behind that flitch plate. I've got to relocate my tiny little spotlights out to the front of the reinforcement piece for the brush guard, but that'll be another project, another day, and not too much modification. Um, all in all, it fits really well. It looks a little bit different than the Alpha because, of course, my winch plate is not out sitting even with the front of the brush guard, but I like it and I feel like it's a big improvement, and so we'll get it further dialed in on down the road. Most of all, it was nice to see that this will fit and only took a little bit of modification so long as you have those frame gussets. So make sure to subscribe or give it a like or whatever you need to do to follow along. There's a whole lot more videos coming, including a big overview of all the different custom stuff I've done on this car.